Let's go to Missouri. Cole, give us some good news on the Tigers.
This is a really interesting team. The way that I would describe Missouri going into 2025 is the way I felt about South Carolina going into 2024. They're the ultimate wildcard team. You could tell me that they get to 10 wins, they make the college football playoff, everything is hitting in the right direction, and they're a force that actually could make some noise. Or they could go 5-7, regression sets on in. They have to go look for the long-term answer at defense coordinator. Offensive coordinator leaves in the offseason. They have a ton of inconsistencies with the offensive personnel at wide receiver. And what we felt about Eli Drinkwitz has completely gone out the door. But how did we get to this point? Let's start off in 2024 with how this team did finish the year 9-3. On top of finishing 9-3, they also lost all 3 games to opponents that were at one point considered top 10 teams in college football on the road. Lost in week 5 to Texas A&M, lost to Alabama in Tuscaloosa after you lost Brady Cook for that game and Drew Pine came on in through, 5 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, the South Carolina game out in Williams-Brice Stadium that went down to the wire. Luther Burden in the back of the end zone gives them the lead. And unfortunately, you just watch as Rocket Sanders gets the shovel pass and South Carolina's dreams of going to the college football playoff stay alive. This was a team that did finish the year with a victory over Iowa in the Music City Bowl, and so they put together back-to-back double-digit win seasons underneath Eli Drinkwitz. Now, there are some people out there that have said this is the most overrated 10-win team in college football. Well, 10 wins in a regular season would have gotten you into the college football playoff, as evident by Illinois and Missouri being on the outside looking in. They both got 10 wins, so they deserve a little bit of credit. They did lose a lot this offseason. Brady Cook, who has been the starter for the last 3 seasons, is now off to the NFL draft. The same thing goes for Theo Wease, wide receiver number 2, and wide receiver number 1, former All-SEC wide receiver Luther Burden. They also lost both of their starting tackles. Marcus Bryant is no longer there, and Armand Membo, who is expected to be a top 15 pick in this year's draft, he is also off to the NFL. Lost several names on the defensive side as well. Here's the good news. They did a good job of replenishing the talent in the transfer portal. Headlined by a guy that Tom knows very well, Bo Pabula is coming on in at quarterback. This is a mobile player who is known for his athletic play style, got a good arm, has the mechanics that you want in a playmaker, and more importantly, I think is a really intriguing fit for Kirby Moore's offense. The things that we saw that were really positive for Brady Cook down the stretch, those are some things that Bo Pabula does extremely well. And while the sample size is very limited, it's very promising. Tom, my mistake. Was it the Nebraska game or was it the Wisconsin game where Pabula played the entire second half?
I believe it was the entire second half. It was most of the second half with Wisconsin. Yeah,
Wisconsin. And he ended up playing really well in that game. I think he had a 71.2 completion percentage. He had 2 touchdowns. He had another rushing touchdown. He was used in packages as well. So there's at least a small sample size of what Kirby Moore is going to be able to work with when it comes to how he stands on out. They also added in a couple of other players. Damon Wilson, the defensive end from Georgia, former top 15 prospect. He comes on into Como. Really good at that Joker type role that you're going to be losing with Johnny Walker going off to the NFL. He has an opportunity to be a complete difference maker off of the edge. You also brought in Johnny Williams, the offensive tackle from West Virginia. You brought in Kevin Coleman, the wide receiver, very underrated wide receiver last season out of Mississippi State. They also landed Dominic Gilsey from Michigan. Nate Johnson comes on in from Appalachian State. Josiah Trotter is one of the more undervalued linebackers from the Big 12 last year. Started 11 games for West Virginia. I think it could be a plug-and-play addition to what you're adding in for a guy in Corey Batoon's defense. And then probably the prize jewel of them all, Ahmad Hardy comes on in from Louisiana Monroe. This was a guy that rushed for over 1,300 yards as a freshman, proved that he was capable of being a do-it-all playmaker. Now he gets to pair alongside with Jamal Roberts. They also had a pretty decent recruiting class overall. Now, decent by Missouri standards. Finished number 14th among all teams, and they were number 6 among SEC teams. They landed, of course, the 4-star wide receiver, and I know I'm going to butcher his name from IMG Academy, but Donovan Ugolbe. They also landed 4-star Javian Harris. Matt Zollers is the long-term quarterback coming on in from Roseford, Pennsylvania. Wide receiver Sean Terry comes on in from Ironton, Ohio. Henry Fanuku comes on in from North Crowley in Fort Worth, Texas. He's another 4-star. And they round out their 4-stars with Marquise Davis, the running back that comes on in from Cleveland, Ohio. What are the expectations for this team? Their schedule is extremely manageable, and they do have a veteran feel with a lot of guys. Now, I know that they are going to have to replace what they're losing in terms of the offensive tackles, but they are replacing both guys with former starters who have experience playing at Power 4 programs. They also have all three returning starters from the interior offensive line, including one of the best centers in college football in Connor Tolleson, as well as Caden Green, the former five-star offensive lineman that was at Oklahoma that crossed enemy lines and went on over to Missouri, which became a massive issue and argument for an ample amount of time in the world of college football because of what we know about that rivalry between Missouri and Oklahoma. I think that when you look at this team, the expectation should be that they are building towards success. They are building towards this identity of being in that realm of that top 20 range. Do you want to be a team that people believe is going to continuously have this type of success? That what we have seen with a place like Ole Miss, what we have seen with a place like South Carolina, what we have seen with a place like Tennessee, Missouri can be in that realm of conversation. They have, I think, a good baseline and a foundation. They return both of their starting coordinators, which is a massive win, in my opinion, when it comes to continuity and consistency. Their schedule, as I also mentioned, pretty easy. The three teams that they played and lost to last year, they all have to come to Como this season. South Carolina early on in the season, a mid-round matchup against Alabama, and they also close out the season against Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma. Several other games I'm also watching at this point. The matchup against Kansas on September 6th. This is a rivalry that has been in the works for ages. I cannot wait to see the Big 12 bout once again continue. That was at least a big storyline when they were in the Big 8. I think that is a game that you cannot sleep on Lance Leipold. You cannot sleep on Jalen Daniels. They have an opportunity to put boot to ass and prove that they are still a forceful team in the SEC. And then back-to-back road trips against Auburn and Vanderbilt. The Auburn game, you needed to go down to the wire and get a comeback with Brady Cook on Percocets and sheer determination to pull off the win against Auburn. And then you went to double overtime against Diego Pavia at home. Now you're going to First Bank Stadium. I think of the X-Factor player this season, I'm going to go with Jamal Roberts and Ahmad Hardy. I know that's kind of a cheating formula, but I think of that running game, taking pressure off of Bo Pabula as he gets acclimated into working with Kevin Coleman, gets acclimated into working with Marquise Johnson and Brett Norfleet, the tight end, who is a mismatched nightmare red zone force, and building a rapport with this offensive line could do wonders for this team. And my X factor, I think, overall for this team, I'm going to go with the secondary. I thought there was a lot of hit and miss last season. They do have some veterans returning. Toriano Pride is going to be back there. They also landed a couple of other transfers, including guys like Jalen Catalon, who's been in college football for what feels like 17,000 years at this point. And then Stephen Hall comes on in from Washington State. If they can build that relationship and have a really good foundation with their back five, including what they're going to have at the Joker position with Damon Wilson, what they're going to have at the Mike linebacker position with Josiah Trotter, and what they're going to have with their three returning starting defensive linemen, including Zion Young, who single-handedly got the win over Oklahoma, I think that there is a lot to like about this Missouri team. There is a very good shot if Pabula is the answer, that with this schedule, they can go 10-2. 10-2 might not be good enough to get you to Atlanta, but we know one thing about the SEC. You got double-digit regular season wins. You're punching your ticket to the college football playoff. Do not sleep on Missouri with this schedule, and if they have the identity that I think that they can possess.
Cole, we'll touch on Pabula a little bit later on when we do buy-sell weight in terms of quarterbacks, but I'm curious, in your opinion, how far off is Mizzou under Eli Drinkowitz from potentially challenging for an SEC title?
I still think of a ways away. That's not to be insulting, but I think that there is a fine line. And then you have to realize that some of the teams that go up against each other, their pathway are more battle-tested when they get to Atlanta. I mean, Georgia, whether or not they went 10-2 last year, they played against an Alabama team that still beat them to oblivion in the first half. They went up against a Florida team that still showed grit and determination despite losing their starting quarterback and then their backup quarterback in DJ Lagway turning to a kid that a year ago was at Yale. They had to play against Auburn. They had to play against Ole Miss, and they lost that Ole Miss game. So these were teams that some people thought were good enough to be in that college football playoff running. Tennessee was one that went to the college football playoff. They handled business against them in the fourth quarter. Where I look at where Missouri is, if they can play 4 quarters of consistent football and lose to an Alabama squad, which they couldn't do last year, if they can play 4 quarters of consistent football and beat a South Carolina team, a team that they almost did last year, if they could be able to dismantle Texas A&M with a defensive-minded coach and Mike Elko at the helm, and be able to handle business against a team that I think that many people are sleeping on in the Big 12 with Kansas and Lance Leipold, then yeah, I could say they're at least in that conversation of maybe they'll make it to Atlanta. But I do look at teams like LSU, and I think that LSU this year, they have a gauntlet to get to the SEC championship in the college football playoff. And they're going to be going up against teams that many will have money on to win a national title and be a force if they make it to the dozen dance. I think Alabama's in that same category. I think Texas, with how much talent they're replacing, if they're able to look as consistent as they did in 2024 as they did in 2025, then there's a really good spot for them to be in that realm. Same thing with Georgia. Same thing with Florida. There's just some teams that Missouri will not be facing off against that are probably not going to get them as prepared. And you got to wonder what's going to happen next offseason when the schedule does change and they do have to play against teams like Texas. They do have to play against teams like Georgia. They do have to play against teams like LSU, because we all know that the schedule is going to flip in a year from now, where if you hadn't played against them the last 2 years, guess you're facing the next 2 years. Hey, thanks for watching The Power 2. If you like this type of content, make sure you hit subscribe and check out some of our other videos found here on the channel.